This is what I'm talking about, guys. Tommy Nation politics.
Once again, would you move? As I'm going to throw another rock right here. Stay here.
Hey guys, this is Tommy.
Would you drink that water?
Politics.
Would you be affiliated with this? Would you bathe your kids when it's bubbling up and it looks like an oil slick?
3 words. What would define your campaign?
Standing up to the billionaire class.
Tommy Nation politics.
50% of our people who are living paycheck to paycheck. And as we speak tonight, half of our people in this country, richest country in the history of the world, are living paycheck to paycheck.
Like people having health care and not killing the planet. And the more those demographic groups move away from the party, the easier it is to keep the establishment firmly in place.
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today?
We're moving forward at a pace that was unimaginable just a short time ago, and we are never, ever going back.
We're going to talk about things that are going to trigger people.
Warning, you are about to enter a free-thinking, innovative, open-minded environment.
On the Biden administration's plan to cancel up to $20,000 in federal student loan debt for millions of borrowers. It is one of the largest cases of the court's current term. CBS's Nicole D'Antonio is following the latest from Capitol Hill. The Supreme Court is hearing arguments on the Biden administration to cancel up to $20,000 in federal student loan debt for millions of borrowers. It is one of the largest cases of the court's current term. CBS's Nicole D'Antonio is following the latest from Capitol Hill.
Cancel.
Demonstrators gathered outside the Supreme Court as justices considered 2 different challenges. One is by 6 Republican-led states that say the debt forgiveness program will cost them money. In court papers, they say it's a breathtaking and transformative exercise of power. The other challenge is by 2 students who say the program should do more to relieve student debt.
This is preventing people from doing what they have to do. Pay bills, start families, continue with their businesses.
During oral arguments, Chief Justice John Roberts asked the government's lawyers about the importance of separation of powers.
I just wonder, given the posture of the case and given our historic concern about separation of powers, you would recognize at least that this is a case that presents extraordinarily serious, important issues.
With respect to the role for Congress, I think what's clear is, of course, we're recognizing that Congress could take additional action if it disapproves this plan.
The justices, 6 conservatives and 3 liberals, will eventually decide if President Biden has the authority to wipe away about $500 billion in student debt. The president's lawyers are arguing the federal law grants him the power to forgive the loans, while opponents say he's going too far. Under the plan, up to 43 million people would be eligible for some federal student loan debt relief. People making less than $125,000 a year could see $10,000 in student loan debt forgiven. And people who got Pell Grants could get up to $20,000 forgiven. A decision is expected by the end of the current term in late June.
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today? Tommy Nation Politics. Free thinking, innovative, and totally open-minded. Tommy Nation Politics.
We'll hear argument first this morning in case 22506, Biden versus Nebraska. General Preliger.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. COVID-19 is the most devastating pandemic in our nation's history, and it has caused enormous disruption and economic distress. Over the past 3 years, millions of Americans have struggled to pay rent, utilities, food, and many have been unable to pay their debts. To head off immediate harm for student loan borrowers, 2 secretaries across 2 administrations invoked the HEROES Act to suspend interest and payment obligations for all Americans with federally held loans. But if that forbearance ends without further relief, it's undisputed that defaults and delinquencies will surge above pre-pandemic levels. So Secretary Cardona again invoked the HEROES Act to provide a measure of loan forgiveness to ensure that this unprecedented pandemic does not leave borrowers worse off in relation to their student loans. The states ask this court to deny that vital relief to millions of Americans, but they lack standing to seek that result. They principally assert harm to a separate legal person, Mohila, that could sue in its own name but has chosen not to do so. And the state's asserted harms to their tax revenues are self-inflicted and indirect. The state's bare disagreement with this policy is not the sort of concrete injury that Article 3 demands. On the merits, the states say the act doesn't authorize the Secretary to ever forgive loan principal. But the Secretary's interpretation of this text is not just a plausible reading, it's the best reading. Congress expressly authorized the Secretary to waive or modify any Title IV provision in emergencies to provide financial relief to borrowers. Loan forgiveness is a paradigmatic form of debt relief, and the Secretary acted within the heartland of his authority and in line with the central purpose of the HEROES Act in providing that relief here. To apply the major questions doctrine to override that clear text would deny borrowers critical relief that Congress authorized and the Secretary deemed essential. I welcome the court's questions.
General, is this a waiver or is it a modification?
It's both a waiver and a modification, Justice Thomas. This appears at JA 261. That was the decision document that the Secretary signed where he said, I hereby issue waivers and modifications of multiple provisions under Title IV of the Student Loan Program. And then that language was repeated in the Federal Register notice that actually implemented that program and constitutes the final agency action that the states are challenging here.
Well, could you explain then, in other provisions, there is express language as to cancellation. And of course, there isn't here. So would you take a minute to explain how a waiver or modification amounts to a waiver, to a cancellation?
Of course. So the Secretary identified various provisions in Title IV that govern the terms and conditions of student loans and also govern discharge and cancellation in other circumstances, as your question suggested. And I think the straightforward way to think about how the verbs map on to the Secretary's action is that he waived elements of those provisions that contain eligibility requirements for discharge and cancellation that are inapplicable under this program, and then modified the provisions to contain the limitations that he had announced as part and parcel of announcing this loan forgiveness. Now, you had suggested that there's no express statement in the HEROES Act to discharge loan principal, and that's true, but the relevant and operative language here is the provision that says the Secretary is empowered to waive or modify any Title IV provision. And so the HEROES Act isn't enumerating any of the various forms of relief that have long been authorized and implemented under this statute. I don't think anything can be read into the fact that there's no express reference to particular forms of relief because Congress was trying to broadly cover the field and ensure that the Secretary had the tools to respond to the national emergency with whatever relief might be necessitated.